In today's discussion, we will play a video featuring a report made by the Guyanese critics who sat down with lawyer Sanjeev Datadin. Together, they delve into the significant charges against businessman Azruddin Mohammed and the ongoing libel suit involving Cathy Hughes. This conversation promises to provide valuable insights into the legal implications and the broader impact on the business and political landscape in Guyana. Let's tune in and explore these pressing issues.
Hello, good afternoon, viewers. Mikhail Rodriguez is coming for you for the break news from Sanjeev Datadin's office. Sanjeev Datadin is one of the prosecuting attorneys in the matter Azruddin Mohammed and the Guyana Revenue Authority. Today, Azruddin was charged. An application was made for bail. So that Sanjeev Datadin was in the court, has a better understanding of what exactly transpired, and would be able to give us a little bit of background. Sanjeev, thanks for having us here. Can you give us an understanding? Because when we left the court, I was doing a live, and Darren Wade and Juan De Silver, I think Dwayne De Silver or something like that, two of the attorneys for Azruddin Mohammed claimed that the case didn't have any validity because it was beyond some 6 months, some charge before, and these kind of things. Give us a little understanding of the case and some substance and what happened in the court.
All right. So after the charges had been read, after Azruddin Mohammed had pleaded not guilty and had been placed on bail, I think Darren Wade got a brainwave, or he was prompted from somebody. Now, there's a general rule that exists that in matters that are in the first 6 months, you could lay them summarily. After 6 months, you have to lay them indictedly. These charges are laid summarily. But he was handed someone handed him a phone to tell him what the section is. And I was encouraging him that it would have done him well to read the whole part of what the act was saying, and he would see whether it was making sense or not. And then I suggested to him that he better skip over the part that don't suit him, because then the submission would sound foolish. So if you want to sound good, skip out all the relevant parts of the section. The simple reality is this: the time which would arise for which this offense and all of that would have arisen is from when GRA would have received the information that this was fraudulent, that the undervalue was given, that the errors, that the true value of the vehicle was $695,000 and not $75,300 as he is complaining, US dollars. Also, the Guyana Revenue Authority has a statute that says there's 7 years for which they can go back on anything in taxes and anything to do with customs. They can go back for a period of time under Section 284, I believe, of the Act. They can go back. So the part that says, the part of the Act that says that it has to be 6 months starts out with unless provided otherwise in any other statute. So the Customs Act is an any other statute, and it provides a different timeline of 7 years as opposed to the 6 month period. So there was much belated brouhaha about it. But quite frankly, if you wanted to read what the legislation says, it's clear. They're decided cases that are very firm on it. This case is very simple. Very, very, very simple. What Mr. Mohammed is charged with is that he made a false custom declaration and he provided a fraudulent value to the Guyana Revenue Authority. Now, these are things which are evidential. So we will produce, or we have to produce, what was paid, the transfers of money to the seller, the wire transfer, the invoices. These are the things that are expected. And we're going to show that on the Asikuda system, which is the GRA system, they supplied invoices which were fake. And they alleged that they paid less for the vehicle. Simple. All of the things that people want to say it has to do with what Azruddin is doing or what he thinks he wants to do in the political arena have nothing to do with it. Any citizen in Guyana, when you import something, we all know this, you have to provide your documents and you have to provide a valuation, because it is based on valuation that taxes are charged. And if you provide a fraudulent one and GRA goes through the process having accepted it, but then later finds out that you submitted a fraudulent declaration, GRA is entitled to come back to you and say, hey, listen, you submitted a fraudulent declaration. And you see, a letter was written to Mr. Mohamed to say to him, we have reason to believe this is fraudulent. We calculate that on the true value, this should be the taxes payable. And we give you 14 days to provide proof or documentation that you would like to provide, to rely on to say that you're telling the truth. Now, if you don't want to do that and your lawyers want to demand, or you want to know what information and what is based, that's a course of action for you and your lawyer, and you could choose. But GRA said if in 14 days you do not provide any information, this will be the tax that we will be seeking, because this is what we have in the information. You don't want to avail yourself of the opportunity to be heard, then that's your business. Everybody has a right to conduct themselves as they see fit. Bearing in mind, they also raised, and there was a brouhaha, I noticed, about the fact that there are civil proceedings going on. As the court recognized, the magistrate, it is well established in the Commonwealth, at least in the Caribbean, by decisions in the Privy Council from Trinidad in Sharma, and by decisions in the CCJ in Bridgelal and in Nurjali. Both of those cases I was involved in. And the court is very clear. Criminal jurisdiction supersedes everything. And the criminal jurisdiction of the court, whatever defenses you have, whatever you wish to say, you must raise it in the criminal court. You can't divide it up and say, well, oh, we're arguing this over there. Every other court must wait until the criminal court has made a determination.
Just to get some clarity from a layman's perspective, Azruddin Mohamed has court matters, injunctions and other court matters in a higher court with GRA.
Yes.
And today he made suggestions that there's an ongoing case already. But it is a case whereas criminal matters always takes precedence. That is what you're saying.
Yes. In the High Court, it's a judicial review process, which is a High Court process. This is a criminal process. Criminal proceedings always take precedence. When you're charged with the criminal law, it has to be determined by a criminal court before you go anywhere. Now, from a criminal court, there are plenty of remedies that exist. You could appeal, you could go on, you could do all the things you want to do. But the criminal, whatever you're charged with criminally, that's what has to be faced first, and then everything. If you believe whatever defenses you want to raise, even if the same matters that you've raised in the High Court, if you want to rely on them, you have to raise it in the criminal court. The criminal court is paramount. These are criminal charges, and they must proceed.
Mr. Datadin, Cordell Jones from Livewire News. Earlier, whilst interviewing Mr. Nazir Mohamed, asking about the big difference between the price that was provided by U.S. authorities and what they would have listed, he spoke about buying things and then depreciating in value. What's your take on that? Could that vehicle have depreciated from 200 plus thousand to 75,000, making them declare that price?
Well, not 200 plus thousand, 695,000.
Sorry, 695,000
to less than 75,000. Now, if you take what you just told me was said, that things depreciate is a fact of life. But you have to look at the time. So if you are alleging there is a public record in the United States, public record, that the vehicle is advertised for sale at 695,000 or 704,000, somewhere in that rate. And they have all these valuations. These are high value cars that have websites that value them. The VIN numbers are included. The state of Florida provides a website of all vehicles, so that when you go buy a vehicle, you know, there are advertisements about whether you get the facts of the Carfax or whatever it is, so that you could see whether the vehicle was involved in an accident, everything. So there is a report that exists for every vehicle. There are no reports of that kind in relation to this vehicle. Then there is the movement. So the car is purchased by a company that shortly thereafter sells the car to Mr. Mohamed. We have the invoice from that company for $695,000. So, and then we have money transfers from a bank in Guyana that transfers that amount of money to the person. So it's overwhelming. Why would you transfer $695,000 to a man if he sold you a car for $75,000? But there are bank transfers that confirm that. There's an invoice which the bank transfer relates to that confirms that. So it's a fairly straightforward process. So I don't think anything about depreciation in value or all that would at this stage, I don't see how it could arise.
Right.
But I'm interested.
Persons talk about political motives. Do you know of any other persons experiencing this from GRA would have brought in a vehicle or something, and then GRA comes after them after the fact to get unpaid taxes?
Oh, there are plenty of those, man. Some of them I am involved with. Others I know various persons have been involved with. This is an ongoing problem. An ongoing issue has been in Guyana about value and undervalue, not only of cars, of goods. There was at one time a major investigation was launched, and there were a number of charges because people were bringing in vehicles alleging that they were 2000 cc, and they were not 2000 cc, because in the new ways, I know it involves some BMWs and Mercedes. In the new ways, what happens is the engines are sealed. They have like a hard plastic coat, the engines are sealed, and there is nothing written on the car itself that says how much the cc of the engine is. So if you brought in, I believe there was a dealer, Vishok was at one time the person involved, he'd have to certify, and he certifies it from the VIN number. And I believe, I'm not sure what he did, but you would have to certify that this is the size of the engine. Because what people were doing is bringing it to 2000 cc, which attracts a significantly lower duty, and also a lot of civil servants who get duty free from the government, the upper cap is 2000 cc's. So if you bring in a car at that, so there's been that, which there have been investigations periodically which have revealed that these cars are actually more than 2000 cc's. The same applies to pickups. There's been at one time people are declaring vehicles, the pickups, to be 2000 cc's, when in fact they're more. But you see, there's nothing written on the vehicle itself that tells you. The manufacturers would have it, but they don't submit the manuals. When the vehicles are bought, they have manuals, they don't do that. So that's also been a bit of a problem.
Mr. Datadin, one of the concerns, and when asked questions, Azruddin Mohameds suggested that there was some bit of collusion with GRA, even suggested that the president might have assisted in him getting 2 Land Cruisers. Is there, given your relationship with GRA, is there an internal investigation going on to figure out even this case that GRA has brought against the Mohameds? There might have been some collusion with GRA, with certain factions of or units within the GRA to help him out with this matter?
Well,
would you say?
I could tell you that as far as it goes and the involvement of the head of state, I've seen absolutely nothing. to suggest that there is anything other than what has been provided directly from Mr. Mohamed by his broker. Those values were the values that were used. Now, you have to understand we're a growing economy. And you have to understand nobody has brought in a Lamborghini before. And as if you brought in a Toyota, for example, they would be far more familiar with what is going on. But you know, when you submit the documents on Asikuda, or when you submit documents to GRA, I know it's a form you fill out and you sign, but if you bother to read what it says on the form, it says that you, when you sign, you are undertaking and guaranteeing that this information is accurate, and that if it is not accurate, you recognize that you could be charged for submitting fake and fraudulent and false documents to GRA. So the system, in large part, is driven by the person doing what is he is doing. So no amount of collusion or no amount of anything would explain why you would sign a document and provide information that you know to be false. Whatever it is you people would want to say, and whatever it is people will want to do and speculate, and you can't stop people from speculating. In everything that goes on in Guyana, there is an expert and there's a person who knows. I can't rely on that, and I have never been one to pay thrift to that. You look at the documents that is supplied. He supplied this documentation. It was submitted to GRA. GRA accepted that he paid $75,000 for the vehicle and went ahead and processed it. They then received information that this was a fraudulent transaction. They then received assistance. They made a request using the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty with the Department of Justice in the United States, and then records were obtained. And when those records were obtained, same VIN number, same vehicle. So it's a fairly straightforward process when it comes up to that.
Mr. Datadin, I want to ask you, you spoke earlier about this being a part of the law. If you declare wrong information, this is breaking the law. What does the law say in terms of penalties for actions like this?
Well, there are two sides of penalties. For this false declaration, there's a period of imprisonment and a fine, which is a thing. For doing fraudulent things, fraudulent declarations, when you're charged with those, the fine that the commissioner levies is equivalent to 3 times the value of what you should have paid in the first place. Plus a period of imprisonment goes with that too. But the fine, the amount, so when you read the statute, it would usually say if you're driving too fast, the fine is $50,000 or 6 months or 2 months imprisonment, right? For these ones, it says 3 times the value. So if you were supposed to declare, if you were supposed to properly pay $10 to the Guyana Revenue Authority and you're convicted, you will have to pay $30 to the Revenue Authority. So 3 times whatever the value is that you defrauded the Revenue Authority, which you the correct figure.
Mr. Datadin, to close on this specific matter, because we want to talk about another matter that you're a part of. It has been made out in the media and in the public that Azruddin Mohammed is being persecuted as a result of his political aspirations. Can you say when GRA started this investigation and what initiated this investigation? Because from my recollection, it was a Facebook post that Azruddin Mohammed himself made. It was actually a confession that he made. But can you say when it came on GRA's radar that he had evaded taxes?
That is so some of it for matters that relate to state, we wouldn't exactly speak about. But yes, Azruddin Mohammed announcing and saying what are the things he did and what he paid. And then the Revenue Authority received information by persons who had seen that post and who had seen what he had said. And then on a larger level, assistance from outside of Guyana with agencies that deal with these things also provided some amount of information that guided the Revenue Authority in starting to in earnest. And then the Revenue Authority, there is something called an MLAT, a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty that exists all around the world as an anti-money laundering device to assist. So if you want information from America, for example, we have the officer here would make a request, the officer under the treaty that is listed would make a request to the corresponding officer in the Department of Justice in the United States for this information. And they would then provide that information to the Revenue Authority. You have to understand, some of the information is provided in a format and a manner that's not intended for court because it's based on information otherwise. But then what usually happens is the agencies would use the law and obtain the evidence in accordance with the law and in accordance with the Evidence Act and produce it in the court for prosecution. And that's what was done here. But the initiation of a lot of what happened was what was posted, and other persons
Posted on Team Mohamed's page.
Yes.
Actually, receipts of taxes paid, which turned out to be greatly undervalued.
Yes.
Just for clarity for the lady.
And other people, persons realized what had happened. And people are entitled to give information to GRA anytime if they have information of otherwise. And people, I don't want to go into too much of that, but that invited responses of various kinds. But you also got to understand this, right? Whether, and the allegation of persecution, no citizen in Guyana should be allowed to defraud the Revenue Authority for whatever. If you are not doing that which you should when you import a vehicle, then it is incumbent upon the Revenue Authority, upon receiving information and receiving cogent information about something, to make a comment about that and to take their investigation as they see fit. There is no special or special treatment that should be because of other things that you're doing. That shouldn't be the place.
So, Mr. Datadin, since we have you here, in another matter, Cathy Hughes versus Jagdeo, you have had a win. You're representing Vice President Jagdeo, and you have had a win. Give us a little bit of a background into that matter. Why was it brought against Jagdeo, and where is it, and what does that win mean for you? Or what does that win mean for Jagdeo?
It means, to answer the second part first, it means that the Vice President did nothing wrong as far as the law is concerned in making a reference to Cathy Hughes as a lowlife. The genesis of it, we all know, it's been, but I'll go through it quickly. So at one of his Thursday press conferences, the Vice President played a recording of something Cathy Hughes said, that how the Vice President was unpatriotic and suggesting a channel and talking about a channel being given to Venezuela, and he's not looking after the interests of the people of Guyana. But that is totally false. The whole issue of a channel and all of that came about in 1989. And their records, the McIntyre report, the report of the good officer, all of that It was a suggestion that had been raised, never offered, never advanced. The conversation of that came from, he wasn't speaker at the time, it was Dr. Barton Scotland, who had spoken to the good officer and says maybe that's something that could be considered. But it never went beyond that. Now, after Parliament had held and passed the resolution, Parliament sat and passed a resolution unanimously that everyone supported this fight against Venezuela's claim to Guyana. Everybody did. So political members of Parliament went all across Guyana to speak about it. And when Cathy Hughes spoke about it in Linden, she made these comments about the Vice President. Vice President Jagdeo played on his phone exactly what those comments were. And following that, he said, imagine this came from someone like Cathy Hughes, right? Someone who had given herself contracts to her own company, and he made reference that she was a lowlife for doing that. The court examined what it was said. The court found that no public officer is expected to do that. They must demonstrate unselfish, undivided loyalty to the public served. The law will not protect a public officer who is doing that from comment from a political adversary or any member of the public. Because you as a public officer can't go and give yourself contracts. And Videomega, she admitted in evidence that she did that. She admitted in cross-examination by me that she was the owner of Videomega and she was signing the checks. She was presented. She was signing checks. She had written the approval. She personally wrote the approvals for the payment to Videomega. So when all of that is considered, the courts found that what that was could amount to a misfeasance or a malfeasance in public office, but it wasn't an issue to be determined in this case. So the court refrained from it. But the court says that if someone is doing that, if a public official is doing that, you can't constrain the people from speaking about it, because those funds are public funds. It belongs to the people. And you can't certainly stop a political rival from highlighting it and saying that. The court found that what the Vice President said, she made a wild claim that it was racist, that it was denigrating women, that it was all of these things. The court found as a fact that there was no evidence in the statement, no evidence produced by her or her witness to say that the Vice President at any time that made any comment about her race. Barrett Jagdeo made no comment about her race. He made no comment about her gender. He made no comment about her status. He made no comment except to say when she was a minister, she gave herself contracts, which she admitted to. And the court said that the word lowlife would refer to somebody who's done things that are disreputable and should not be doing. And for a public official, there's a standard, and it is something that should be frowned upon and is disreputable, dishonorable if you like, that you're a public official giving contracts to yourself. So the decision that the court made, the court found as a matter of fact, made a finding that given what she had said, and at the height, at the zenith of tensions between Guyana and Venezuela, last year when this was going on and people were genuinely concerned about what was going on, she chose to brand Barrett Jagdeo as being unpatriotic. Now, you have to understand the value of a former president and now the general secretary of the PPP and the vice president of a country to be being called the unpatriotic in something that is so important? And was he entitled to respond? And the court says, of course he's entitled to comment and respond about it. And of course he's entitled to defend himself. And what he did was not beyond the pale. It was not beyond the pale that he made these things, made these comments.
In this written judgment that is before you, is there anything within that suggests the court accepts that Cathy Hughes is a lowlife?
Well, these are not the findings which the court. The court would be asked to find whether the reference, critic, only you would do that. Only you would ask these things. But I'm telling you, all fun and joke aside, I'm telling you, the court's consideration is whether in the context with which Vice President Jagdeo used it in response to what was said about him, whether it amounted to defamation. The court found that it was not amounting to defamation, having regard to what was said and what was false. So, having on one hand stood in front of the country and say to the people, we stand together. You go to a meeting and you try to denigrate and pull down somebody as being unpatriotic on the same issue which you committed in Parliament that you would say. You're not keeping your word. That in itself is the wrong thing to do. That in itself, in my mind, shows that you say one thing when you're in Parliament and everything's been recorded, but when you go off to your political groups, you say something else. That shouldn't be. If you don't want to say that, then stand in the Parliament and say what you got to say. Don't be sneaky and say one thing that we all stand together, and days later you're in Linden, denigrated and pulling down somebody. That's wrong.
You know, you being, I'm always guided by you being an attorney, being a successful attorney, and you're very eloquent in your words. In short, you're saying, don't be a lowlife.
No, I am saying, in short, Vice President Jagdeo has been vindicated 100%. He acted which a court considered reasonably. He's been awarded.
He's been vindicated from calling Cathy Hughes a lowlife.
He's been vindicated, yes. And he's also been awarded $4,099,999 in costs, in accordance with the High Court rules. So, as far as this is concerned, there was no wrongdoing on the part of the Vice President. The Vice President was entitled to defend himself, but he also said why he was doing it. He said, this is why you are a lowlife, because when you were a minister, you gave yourself contracts, and we have the proof to that. And he even said, we have the proof of that. And in cross-examination, I had asked Cathy Hughes, I said, you have seen it published in the press for years by Kaichor News, by Stabrook News, by Times. You've seen it published for years that you had given yourself contracts. Your own company instructed that payments be made to your own company, written checks, and signed those checks as an officer of the company while you were a minister of government. And all of that was admitted. And I asked her, did you ever sue anybody for alleging that you were giving contracts to yourself? And she said she never did. But in the public domain, everywhere in the newspapers, there were pictures of the checks, there were pictures of the payment, there were pictures of her signature on the authorizations. These were all things that were very, very visible publicly. And what the Vice President made a comment about in relation to that was public knowledge, and she never sued anybody. And the Vice President, in fact, in his in his press conference. He said she wouldn't sue me about that because I have the proof. But she chose to sue him because of his utterances in classifying her as a lowlife.
So basically,
But when she said things like the vice president, he's a dangerous, evil man. These kinds of comments that you make about the vice president of the country, and he can't respond. He can't respond to what you say. The court found that what he said was reasonable, didn't find that it was defamatory.
Mr. Sanjeev, in light of the fact that you have so eloquently read out the court's findings, and as an officer of the court, it's very important to give or relay exactly what the court has said. But in that, and in light of the fact that I cannot get you to accept that Cathy Hughes is a lowlife as a result of these court findings, I will rest my case.
Mr. Datadin, allow me to ask this or put it this way. So, based on what you're saying is that the court found Mr. Jagdeo's statements in keeping with the characteristics or the behavior of Ms. Hughes.
Well, so put it this way. Without putting too fine a point on it, the court found that the description for what Dr. Jagdeo, what the vice president was saying was being done by Cathy Hughes, was not defamatory.
Okay.
Okay?
Gotcha.
It was indicative of low-life behavior. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
All right.
sir.
Thank you.